Great, thank you. Well, welcome everybody to Architectural Review Board meeting on February 4th, 2021. I'll read a little script as the initial beginning. Pursuant to the California Governor's Executive Order N2920, this meeting will be held by virtual teleconference only with no physical location. Spoken comments via computer will be accepted through the Zoom teleconference meeting. To address the board, go to zoom.us/join. Meeting ID is 986-4526-8157. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, click on Raise Hand. When called, please limit your remarks to the time allotted. Spoken public comments using a smartphone will also be accepted through the Zoom mobile application. To offer comments using a regular phone, call 1-669-900-6833 and enter meeting ID 986-4526-8157. When you wish to speak on an agenda item, hit *9 on your phone so that we know that you wish to speak. Alrighty, can we get a roll call?
Yes, before I start the roll call, I just want to welcome our new chair, Ozma Thompson, and our vice chair, Grace Lee. And with that, here comes the roll call. Chair Thompson?
Present.
Vice Chair Lee?
Present.
Board Member Balte?
Present.
Board Member Hirsch?
Present.
Board Member Liu?
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the welcome. And thank you for being a great chair, Board Member Balte, that I might follow in your steps. All right, the next item is oral communications. The public may speak on any item not on the agenda. Do we have any raised hands?
We currently do not have any raised hands.
Great. All righty, so we'll move on to agenda changes, additions, and deletions.
No changes at this time. I believe the agenda was already changed to have the El Camino project go. No, sorry, to have the Embarcadero project go first. So as long as you have that in your agenda.
That's right, I have that. Great. City official reports.
Yes, so thank you. My name is Jody Gerhardt. I'm the manager of current planning, and thank you, the new chair Thompson, thank you, and vice chair Lee, and also thank you to our past chair, board member Balte. As far as official reports, we will remain virtual for the foreseeable future. So you can still have your pajamas on the bottom. And then for the next hearing, February 18th, we're expecting to discuss the objective standards. We do have some revisions, especially to the graphics and things. I will try and get that up on the web as early as possible so that you have a little bit of extra time. And so I'll send you an email when that's available. The other items on the agenda would be the 650 Clark Way, which is, it's not a retaining wall, but more of a stitched pier wall to hold back the land from the creek. And we also have 656 Lytton Avenue, which is the subcommittee. So that will just be 2 members of the board. So thank you.
Thanks. All right, we'll move on to our first action item. So this is 1700 Embarcadero Road. Request for a preliminary architectural review for a proposed 2-story, approximately 31,377 square foot automobile dealership. Environmental assessment, not a project. The formal application will be subject to the California Environmental Quality Act review. I wanted to ask the board if there are any disclosures.
I have visited the site.
I have as well.
No disclosures regarding this project.
Yeah, no disclosures.
Great, and I visited the material board.
Cool. Thank you.
Alrighty, I'll hand it over to staff.
Yes, we have Sheldon Ossing here to present for staff.
Good morning. Let me just get the PowerPoint up here. All right. So here we are. So some things change and some things remain the same. Welcome to the new year. We're back with another iteration of this site. We'll go a little bit more about the background here in just a moment. Great overview by the chair. It's a preliminary review of a commercial project located on 2.5 acres. And this is just at the corner property. Does not include the Audi site. It is zoned CS with the site and design combined district as well as automobile dealership combined district. Request for the applicant would be an architectural review, site and design review, as well as design enhancement exception for setbacks. And we're just here to review and provide some comments to the applicant as well as to staff. This site has been a subject of many projects and as well as hearings, 16 public hearings to date. The site is a vacant site, a former restaurant that was closed in 2014. The site was rezoned to CS from industrial in 2009. A hotel was previously approved in 2013, but that entitlement expired in 2015. And that is an image on the lower left there from the intersection. And then you've had an automobile dealership proposed in 2015 for the site. That project went all the way to the city council, and then it was directed back to the ARB. It was deemed to be too big, didn't fit in with the context of the Baylands. The applicant withdrew their application, and then another application came in 2018. That's the one on the far right. That one then also encompassed the adjacent Audi site as well. So it was a bigger project, but a little shorter in height. That went all the way to the council, got this zoning changed to add the automobile dealership combining overlay. There was an appeal earlier last year, and that was upheld. But then the applicant decided to withdraw and sell the site to the current owner with this new proposal. So a little bit about the site context here. It's located in an area that's predominantly commercial and office use. The two properties that are adjacent along Embarcadero Road are dealerships. That's the Audi and the Honda site. There's some also automobile uses kind of behind on one of the streets there. It is within the Baylands area, but these properties are in the private properties area. This property does not directly abut the Baylands. You can see a little bit of that green in this photograph on the right, upper right there, but this property does not touch that directly. The properties in the area are generally characterized by larger buildings with large setbacks and surface parking. The one exception really is the Audi showroom has the closest setback to Embarcadero Road. It's about 30 feet. All the others have really kind of larger setbacks. On this property in particular, 1700, there was an 80-foot easement along East Bay Shore for various utilities, including the overhead transmission line. So it does preclude structures from being included there, especially height-wise, in terms of a height limit of 15 feet for structures, and that includes vegetation. So a little bit of project summary for this project. It's just solely a Mercedes-Benz brand and includes service and sales. The total square footage is 31,000 square feet. The total FAR is 0.29, and that includes 0.25 for the dealership, as well as 0.04 for the showroom area. The site coverage is 27%. The height is up to 26 feet with an architectural element that does go to 36 feet. And then there's surface parking. There's no mechanical lifts. The only mechanical lifts are for the service vehicles when they're being serviced. That's very typical for dealership, but not any customer parking inventory parking. There's also additional setback that's proposed along East Bayshore and Embarcadero Road that's consistent with all the other dealership applications for the site. And then there's also a car wash for the dealership. Some notable differences between the approved prior project, the proposed project. You can see the square footage is down by about 20,000 square feet. The FAR is down. The lot coverage is also less. The height is less. Setback is also less there. It's a little greater along the Bayshore side by a few feet. The approved project had a multi-use path. This project does not propose that. The approved project proposed the removal of trees along East Bayshore, and this project does not propose that at all. It does preserve those trees. A little bit more about the site plan massing. It shows that it will follow really the predominant pattern in the area with the larger setbacks, the surface parking, and the building sort of situated in the middle. The CS zone does require build-to setbacks. Mostly that makes sense in the El Camino Real area to try to get your building close to the pedestrian realm. This is automobile dealership, automobile-oriented use. And then of course, coupled with some of the easement restraints, it does make sense to support the design enhancement exception. The height of the building is also would be mostly consistent with the rest of the surrounding. Again, 26 feet. It's a standard 2-story type of building. The covered drive-through for the service is exempted from the gross floor area, and that's consistent with the automobile dealership combining district. So that area is 4,400 square feet. Just showing some of the floor plans here. The exhibit kind of breaks down that the showroom there in yellow, and then the dealership area in green, which includes the service area. The service drive, as I mentioned, is excluded. There's a little bit of limited second floor space there with some offices and storage areas. So going to the elevations here, and the applicant will discuss more about the materials. The project is, again, 2 stories in height in some areas, but it does roughly maintain that 26-foot plate. And then you have that 36-foot architectural element, which would have the future sign. So along this elevation, the building does have, and the site does have kind of irregular shape. But generally here at the corner, you have the showroom, which has the fenestration. And then you have some of those elements that are consistent with the brand of Mercedes, which is that black color, the silver colors, so that metal that's being used there, and some of that white. They are introducing some of that reclaimed wood siding, as well as a landscape wall, which is more kind of consistent with some of the features that we had in the prior element of the prior project, with trying to bring in the consistency with the baylands. And this is along Embarcadero Road, kind of similar features here. Again, because the way that the shape of the building, shape of the lot, so some of these views are similar. But again, you're continuing that silver panels mostly along Embarcadero Road. And on the opposite side of Bayshore faces Audi. Then here you have the silver panels closer to the street. And then as you get towards the rear of the property, it transitions to a stucco type of material. And then opposite of Embarcadero, you can see on the left side, a little bit of that landscape wall really terminates there. And then it transitions to paneling closest to the street. And then from there, it turns to stucco towards the rear of the building. And this is the side with the car wash. So the renderings just show a little bit more detail here. Obviously, this is at the preliminary stage, a little more conceptual. We'll ask for more detailed, contextual types of exhibits for the formal. With the landscaping, as we expect, with a smaller footprint, the project on the left side, prior project on the right side, that you have more opportunities for landscaping. And as I mentioned, they are saving those trees along Bayshore Road and Embarcadero Road. Some considerations here to think about, and what we're looking for some feedback from the board is how the project fares against the required findings. Some of these are just relationship to the neighborhood setting, the context, the transitions in scale to adjacent properties, as well as the scale and mass, and then architectural design theme cohesiveness, use of materials. We need to consider how the project is consistent with the Valence master plan, to use only muted natural colors, choose materials and finishes that will weather well, preserve the horizon line, low and horizontal elements, reduce the size and signs, mounting heights of regular signs, and then also just to design for practicality. And so I think we have a lot of experience on this site with the other two projects, and this project tried to bring some of those features here, which we can probably hone a little bit more. And then lastly, just kind of the pedestrian oriented and design. And so that brings us to really the multi-use path, which I think is something worth considering to look at. The city's bicycle pedestrian master plan does indicate that there's a class 2 bicycle facility along this frontage. But when you actually go out there, that does not exist. There's no facility such as that. And so the plan does not prescribe how to address a gap in that situation because it assumed that there was something there. We knew that, staff knew that. So when we were having discussions with the prior applicant for their request, and their request again had a legislative request for the zone change, we negotiated to get this gap reconciled. So this multi-use path was something that was proposed by the prior applicant. It did necessitate the removal of the trees there with some other plantings on the site that were at 15 feet. What would be needed here, we need 12 feet. We need to have 8 feet for 2 lanes, and then we need 2 2-foot shoulders to make this work. There's a right of way now, 10 feet, and then there's a 5-foot landscape buffer between the edge of the property and the parking lot. So there's some room that we could put something there. Like I said, there are trade-offs in implementing the pathway, would be the removal of trees. There could be some other options. We would need to work this out, but we want to get some direction from the board, whether there's something that we can get support to pursue. But it is something that was on the previous project, and we would expect to see something here to alleviate that gap. This is an important area to have bicycle travel, especially with the Baylands. The other issue we noticed with the last project was a car wash. It's still facing the neighboring property that had the objection to the issue. So with this project, we'll have to have a new acoustic study that will address the noise for the site. The site does not have any backup generators, so that would help a little bit. But certainly we will have an updated acoustic study that will address the issues and be consistent with the municipal code. So that ties into CEQA. The prior project had included an adopted mitigated negative declaration. And so we would propose to provide an addendum to the previous document, and we'll include updated studies, which are acoustic and traffic analysis. So that will be included with the formal application. So with that, we'll be conducting the public hearing, provide direction on the project, and the applicant will consider those and file a formal application. So staff recommends that ARB take the following action, which is to review, provide comments, and no formal action is requested. So with that, I conclude my presentation, and thank you.
Thank you. I guess next we'll hear from the applicant.
Hello, this is Eric Iverson with Swickard Automotive Group. We are the applicant here today for the Mercedes of Palo Alto site. I also have my team with me that we can go through a short presentation, and then we're also able to answer any questions should anybody have any questions. So if it's okay, I'd love to share my screen and pull up a PowerPoint and go through a couple items that Sheldon had touched on and give a little background and what we're hoping to accomplish here.
Thanks. Yeah, you'll have 10 minutes.
Okay. I'm going to try to share my screen. Let's see. I think I need somebody from the city to allow me to share. Would that be correct?
You're a panelist, so you should have the ability to share your screen. There's a share screen button at the bottom of your screen.
Yes.
Jody, will we require applicants to state and spell their name for the record?
It can be very helpful, yes. Otherwise, it ends up misspelled in the minutes.
Okay.
Okay.
So Mr. Iverson, could you also state and spell your name for the record?
Absolutely. It's right in front of you right now, but Eric Iverson, E-R-I-C-I-V-E-R-S-E-N. Eric Iverson, Director of Real Estate Construction for Swickard, S-W-I-C-K-A-R-D Automotive Group.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So again, we are here. Hopefully you can see a screen with the green Mercedes on it right now. And my team involves our architect, also on the call is Douglas Van Kay. Al Shahagi is our civil engineer, and Brian Love is our landscape architect. Again, if there's any detailed questions, that they're here to answer those questions. Again, Sheldon went through the overall perspective and overall general design of the facility. I don't want to repeat some of the things that he already touched on. I think one of the largest items here today is that we've come back with a much more scaled down proposal than the previous Mercedes proposal. Again, we had bought this land and bought the basically the franchise rights for Mercedes to go here. The prior owners couldn't put it all together, and the cost of the facility was just simply too great. So we came back with what I think is a much more simple and straightforward proposal, more in line with the other car dealerships on Embarcadero, the Audi and the Honda store, yet providing I think what I would even call a better design, adding some fun elements like the reclaimed wood and the live green wall. Location, I think Sheldon went over that very well. Again, we're next to the two other car dealerships, and mostly other than that, surrounded by office buildings. With Audi being the newest store, which is a very standard corporate Audi design, which is immediately next door. Behind us is office buildings, as we all know, and then of course the Baylands is just beyond that. The entire site, as we know, our biggest challenge are the high-powered transmission lines, and those don't go anywhere. There's a large easement underneath them. We can't obviously build on them, and our stormwater drainage is also very limited what we can do within that easement. If you take a quick note here on this slide, you will see to the right the trees that Sheldon had mentioned that personally I am very much in love with, and very much in love with the shade that they provide. Love to do everything possible to maintain that row of trees along Bayshore, East Bayshore. And then again, as I had previously mentioned, this is a picture that Sheldon didn't show, but it shows the massing of the previous submittal that was approved, how significantly larger that building was. It had multi-story service, it had car elevators, many things. They were trying to accomplish everything on this one site, and which ultimately made the project unbuildable and not affordable for them. So again, we came back with a much simpler, straightforward, smaller, overall smaller dealership. As you can see, the dashed line is just how significantly larger the initial previous proposal was. And again, this is the side view from East Bayshore. And again, you're starting to see some of the fun stuff, which is the reclaimed wood siding and the landscape wall to really break up that overall facade. You have the modern glass and architectural composite panels along the front going into a reclaimed wood product. If anybody has any questions, I could talk for 15 or 20 minutes just on how awesome and cool reclaimed wood is. And then I think landscape walls are great, especially in the climate that we have in Palo Alto. The plan itself on the inside does separate what we call front of house and back of house. Along Embarcadero is the front of house with the showroom. It's the part of the car dealership that we're all familiar with. Showroom, service riders, separated with a service drive that does have opening and closing doors. Weather is great, maybe 9 months of the year, and those doors will be open during the day, but closed at night for the service drive. And then the actual service shop with 22 bays to work on cars. The car wash, in this proposal, as opposed to the previous one, is attached to the building. So it's approximately 40 feet further away from the property line as the previous proposal. So the acoustic study, as Sheldon had mentioned, obviously we will get that updated. We have talked to the same acoustic engineer. I mean, common sense tells us moving that facility farther away from the property line will only reduce noise. We've brought on the same landscape architect that had worked on one of the earlier proposals. And I think we have ourselves a pretty good landscape plan. Again, preserving those trees along East Bay Shore is critical, at least in my mind. Reclaimed wood product, like I said, I could talk for a half hour on that. It is an awesome product. The company goes around to churches, anything that's being demolished, not only in the United States, but around the wood, they salvage it. They re-mill it, replane it, and then send it back out and gets installed on a building. The green wall that we talked about is not just vines growing up the side of the building. It is actually a green wall with vertical planters. And should an area or a planter die off, they can actually be removed and rehung with a new one. Grown in a nursery to always have a fresh green wall appearance. Oh, and then finally, once again, my favorite trees. I don't think I'm going to stop talking about my favorite trees because they provide excellent shade. They are under and adjacent to high powered lines. It would be really hard for us to replace those with anything that's going to get much more than 8 to 12 feet, probably tall. And here we have established trees that, like I said, provide excellent shade, whether you're walking or biking on the street, either or. So that's all I have. I am able to answer any questions, and as is our architect, engineer, and landscape architect are all here to chat with everyone.
Thank you. Do we have any questions of the applicant? No, I don't see any. Do we have, I guess I'll open this to public comment. Do we have any members of the public that would like to comment?
We do not have any public speakers for this item.
Okay. I guess I can close the public hearing then and bring this back to the board. Shall we start with board member Liu?
Sure. So thank you for your presentation. I'm generally in support of the project. I've got a couple items for you. So I think the first one is how much off-site parking are you going to need for like inventory of cars? So if I look at other similar dealerships, they have like large parking garages, or if you even look at like the Audi dealer next door, and they've been using this property for car inventory for several years now. So I guess my question is how much is there, and then where are the, and then saying that I think that we're really kind of concerned Embarcadero, and I don't want trucks to block.
Alex, you're kind of cutting out a little bit.
Why don't I try, why don't you pick me and I'll try online.
Okay, all right, we'll circle back to you. Board Member Balte?
Thank you. Osma, thank you to the applicant for this presentation. I'm generally in favor of the project presented to us. I think it's an easier pill to swallow than the large building we had already approved, so it's hard enough to be in favor of it in principle. I'd like to see if the applicant can't shift the building perhaps slightly farther away from Bayshore in order to give us both the trees and the pathway. I've argued strongly in previous projects on this site, and I really do feel that the trees should be preserved. They're mature trees under a power line, so they cannot be replaced. It's really a shame not to have a pathway for the public at the same time. And if there's any way to push the building back a bit further, perhaps, or to whatever it takes to get the parking and display area they need, but also to have some sort of a pathway, perhaps inboard of the trees, that would be really appreciated. I think it can be done, although it might impact one row of parking in the front unless you shift the building back. But it would certainly be a wonderful gesture to the city if you could get both a substantial pedestrian bicycle path along Bayshore and preserve those trees. That would go a long way to really smoothing your approval process on what has been a very contentious site. It's a great gesture to the city of goodwill. And I'd love to see you make an effort to make that happen. Other than that, the building siting is fine, I think. I'm wondering if you can't modulate the massing just a little bit more. Looking straight at the elevations, the height of the building is consistently the same throughout, with the exception of the Mercedes bin wall. And it seems to me it would be a pretty easy matter to raise up or down different pieces of it to give it a little more modulation and variation. It's a fairly long facade, and it would benefit from that. Again, it could just be the way you do the parapets, but it would help to have that done. I'd like to see you consider flipping the, what I call the warmer materials, the reclaimed wood and the green wall and such, to be on the Embarcadero side. I don't know if you were if you followed the approval process from previous buildings. We had come to the idea that the building does need to conform to the Baylands design guidelines, which require muted and natural materials. We had felt that going towards the Baylands is where it was important to have these materials, say on the Baylands side of the Mercedes fin. Your design seems to do the opposite. You have the natural and muted Baylands type materials, but along Bayshore, not along Embarcadero where you're leading backwards. I appreciate that the Audi dealership immediately to the left really doesn't seem to have those kind of materials, so it does lead you to some sort of design challenge. But it'll be easier for this to be claimed to be in compliance with the Baylands design guideline standards if you get those materials just sort of flipped onto the other side of the building. I think that would be easily done. Again, you could put, say, a reclaimed wood facade on the office facility while you leave the showroom having the glass and steel look that Mercedes likes. I caution you, or I don't, maybe you just want to check and see, but on the previous projects, there was a strong design aesthetic about some kind of decorative metal poles and elements used to hold up the canopy at the front. And you're not showing any of that now. You may want to really be sure that Mercedes will accept this design quality or this design style. We were told on previous projects that they would not, that they wanted some more of that decoration that you see on other Mercedes dealerships. I think it can go either way, but you want to be sure that you've got that covered with them. The car wash, I think, is going to be fine where it is. The previous one was right on the property line, and that was where the problems came from. Nonetheless, they did a detailed acoustic study, and they had to actually put closing doors on their car wash to make sure that it didn't acoustically bother the neighbors. There's the folks in the office building to your right, behind you, have lunch tables out in the back area there, and you really don't want to disrupt that with a loud car wash. Perhaps you could just come back to us with acoustic studies showing that it doesn't do that. The fact that you're 30 feet away is a big help, and I'd hate to see you have to put those closing doors on this, but study it and just see if you can make it work. I don't see there's a problem otherwise with that. My last comment to you is if you could be sure to supply real material samples next time so we can really understand, especially the reclaimed wood. What are you proposing? A photo of it just doesn't cut it. I understand these days it's hard to do that, but we'd love to see it. So that's what I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Board Member Baltain. I want to check in with Board Member Liu to see if his audio got set up.
Okay, how's that?
That is
Is
better.
that better?
Yes.
Okay. So I just have a few items. So one is just the like any off-site car inventory and where do those get delivered to this particular project site. And I would just say that I do know that we have some issues on other car dealers in Palo Alto where they unload the cars in the traffic lanes, during commute times. On the elevations, I do like the changes that you've made with the reclaimed wood and the planted facade. I'm actually okay with the locations. On the elevations, though, I think the northeast elevation could use a little bit more work. It's very flat, and you have like two different materials that are coplanar with each other. So I think that one isn't up at the same level as the other three elevations. On the bike path, it seems to me that I think the bike path would be appreciated, but it does have a flaw, which is like the southbound bicyclists using that path would then still have to cross over across East Bayshore, so that it's not a perfect solution. If we can get the bicyclist route to work in the street, I'm actually okay with that. If there's a way for staff to look at that, if there's a way of narrowing lanes to get a bike route in there. And the issue is that in the late afternoon, that the car traffic backs up from the Dumbarton Bridge on occasion, and then the bicyclists end up using the sidewalk. On the existing trees, I think that's also tied in probably to the flood elevation. So I mean, the previous scheme had to raise the grade up, and so I guess, and then that can cause issues with saving existing trees if you're regrading the entire site. So I think that we do need more information on that, on how you're handling the grade. If you're going to raise the whole site up similar to the previous scheme or the Audi dealer next door. And so I think that's all that I have. I'm generally in support of the project. I think the massing looks good, and I think the material changes are well considered. Great, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Board Member Liu. We'll go on to Board Member Hirsch.
Well, thank you for the presentation. This certainly is a step down in massing and prominence of the site, of the building on the site. I have similar questions about the parking as Board Member Liu. What's happened here is previous scheme managed to keep all the significant amount of the parking in the building itself, but here we're doubling up on the lanes of parking and storage for a significant element of the site here, where you cut back on the building and you increase the storage on the site itself. I don't think it bothers me much on the site that faces the office building, but it is a problem, more of a problem on Bayshore, I think, where more of the visible nature of this building is going to be seen daily, to have a double layer of parking. So, but then where does it go if you don't put it there? I don't have a good answer to that, but I would have hoped that it could look a little bit more natural. I think that keeping the trees, I agree, is a good idea, but then somehow or other you have to work out the bicycle path and the issues related to a limited sidewalk. It's not a sidewalk where pedestrians will use it very much. So perhaps there's a way of compromising, take a little bit of it closer to the tree, and or find a way in which the trees can actually live with a drainage scheme under them that allows for an expansion of the sidewalk. It's a study that needs to be done. To expand that enough to have it a bike path, I think is important. And to have that indicated to us all the way around the corner onto Embarcadero is also significant. In terms of parking and entry to the building, I'm somewhat discouraged by the fact that if you get out of your car, you're a visitor along there. To get to the front door of this building means you have to pass a service entry area. If you're familiar with the way those usually get jammed in the early morning, and there's really a very difficult kind of pedestrian issue there. Certainly what will happen, from my experience, is that those cars will back up and align with your whole passageway into the site from the Bayshore. And a lot of those parking spots will be basically parking for vehicles coming for repair. And I don't know, that seems to be, to me, to be a problem relative to how you deal with the entry to the building at the same time. I notice on the inside that there doesn't seem to be any planning for people who are going to wait in some way for their cars. So, I mean, that's a question I probably should have addressed to you earlier. Maybe you could come up with an answer to that at some point a little later. No waiting area, no intention of people who are going to be staying, and more minor car repair issues or whatever. I wonder if actually maybe the service isn't brought into the back of the building, and that you create more of a plaza entry on this side and limit the exit the other way. That maybe that might kind of solve that kind of issue, because after all, you could have backup of cars waiting for a service at the backside, whereas front side does create a conflict with your front door. In terms of the materials, you know, in general, I'm sort of favorable to the design. Yes, it does take away a lot of the detail, as Mr. Bolte commented on the front, which I really rather liked, the detail that was kind of Mercedes-like of those. But this is a different kind of a canopy. Maybe something more in the detail of that will occur later on in the design here. It's a very thin element now. I don't know exactly what to suggest. The point of view here is taken to see the elevation completely because it's far enough away. But if you're closer in, it becomes a different elevation. So you're using that to kind of link the two major forms. And frankly, I don't quite see where the industrial feel of the Mercedes car and the detail of the part that faces Embarcadero kind of relates to all of a sudden introducing this kind of a wood element and then switching to a very much more even natural feel of the planting. But if others think it's appropriate, I will say one thing about it is at least it turns the corner, which the planting doesn't do, and I wish it would. Whether or not the building as a lower profile is seen from the Baylands or not, I don't like the idea of a material like that just ending at the corner. I just think even though it's a sharp corner, I sort of feel if you're going to make a statement that you're doing a natural building and it's an environmental building, and then all of a sudden you switch when you turn the corner, I don't see how that really works well. I would think you'd carry it around to at least to the notch on the side that faces the office building. And it would certainly be a nicer gesture towards the office building rather than just being the back of us, something functional like it is now. Other aspects of this, I think we need to see that perimeter elevation and the planting in much, much more detail. And I'm sure your landscape people can work on that. But I do question, I question, so I wait to see whether the board, others on the board also do, this use of the wood and then the planting wall, and whether that's kind of the way in which the forms are used in order to do that, because all of a sudden you're going to switch now from a wood to a metal canopy to the metal building above. It's a strange connection of paste on kind of elements, in my opinion. So maybe it should be one or the other, or maybe the planting area really turns the corner as it enters into that niche. But I think my most major concern is that somehow that the entry to this building for me, doesn't function well at all. And it should be an emphasis here. But with that, and the question that Alex raised, I think is a very good question. What do you do with the storage of cars? Is this the best way? To be honest, I thought the one thing I really did like about the previous scheme is it got more cars off the site. And I'd wondered whether or not it would be possible to somehow use the roof of the maintenance area for storage of cars. Would that make a better site plan? But I could go along with it the way it is, as long as there's plenty of planting and softening of the perimeter. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch. Let's move on to Board Member Lee.
I want to thank Sheldon for a very complete presentation and thank the applicant for bringing this forward. Well, the site has a long history and it's great to see that it's going to move forward. I recall the hotel discussion, which was as far back as 2011, I remember. So I can be brief. I'm in support of this project. I think that, knowing this is a preliminary and that the project will be coming forward with more information at a greater scale, I look forward to that. So I'll begin though with this multi-use path discussion. I appreciate Sheldon's kind of his way of communicating that there is a larger plan for access in this area, and this is one site. However, we do want to connect, and my feeling is, I did appreciate that multi-use pathway in the previous project that we saw, and I don't want to tell you how to do it, and I'm not a huge bicyclist, so not like Alex probably, but I don't know how to do it. But I encourage you to work with the city and collaborate and see what's possible, and we look forward to seeing that move forward. Maybe it is possible, I just want to put it out there, that the benefits of the path outweigh the preservation of those trees. I mean, sometimes that occurs. And so I don't know what's the right answer, but please pursue that goal, would be my advice. The overall architectural massing and the elevations and the way that they're presented, even at this beginning, preliminary, I feel very comfortable you know, just how in the, and for me, it's that terrific corner of, you know, where you see, where you, I know there's that tower and, you know, it's the corner, it's set back quite a bit, but I love how the showroom turns and, you know, it's a very simple design. There's a brow, it wraps, and then you have this highlight, which is very important. You have your sign that's 10 feet larger that highlights, and, you know, I'm fine with the Embarcadero elevation as it turns. I did go and see the materials board and at City Hall, and I appreciate the diversity of materials, absolutely. And I think the general placement of them make a lot of sense. One thing though, I did want to note, and I appreciate board member Peter's comments. It is true. There's an extreme horizontality here, and the length of those facades, though they are set back quite far back from the property line and from the street, you know, you really read, and I just think facades on a big building like this with a long length, a lot of surface area, the overall design moves make sense. However, it is true. It's very long, and I'm not sure though, given the length of those facades, if small, you know, pop-ups are going to make a difference. And so, you know, I'm fine with the 26 feet to 36 feet and the way that it's sitting. If you want to show us an option that shows, you know, that it comes up and down in different areas, I think you'll still see an extreme horizontality. I'm open to reviewing that as well. The other piece that I wanted to mention was glare. So the way the sun is moving around the site, and I'm always really hesitant, and at first my sign materials, but I wasn't sure. The brow is white, right? And then you have two different tones of silver. And what I find is the light silver sometimes reads as white under extreme glare or sun. And so when I look at the elevation, it really is just on the not the Embarcadero, the East Bay shore, where there's a little bit of length and it's up high and it's light silver. So I just want to make sure about glare issues, and if maybe that's not too much, it's just something that I want to bring up. I believe that the whole screen wall, I'd love to see how that is going to move forward. I couldn't tell from the landscape plan. It looked like, I don't know what's planted there. And so it'll be terrific to see how that, what that is. And the reclaimed wood, the warm color is a terrific addition to have. The issue is where you turn though, right, from East Bay Shore and that northeast elevation. I agree with board member Lou. I think that could use some, just another round. It's rather blank. So let's see, did I cover it? There is the other piece in terms of, yes, so the plants, when you show it in terms of the green screen wall, you know, I think you're going to come back with landscape plants that are a little bit larger in scale, and so we can get a sense of how that would, and the choices there in terms of, because it is a feature, and it's kind of nice that it's on that side of the building, and that we just want it to thrive. I can stop there. I'll hand it back to Chair Ozma.
Thank you, Board Member or Vice Chair Lee. Great. So I share a lot of the similar opinions that have been expressed. I'll kind of go, not all of them, so I'll go in order, and we'll maybe try to wrap at the end to see if we can come to a consensus. In general, I'm also in support of the project. I appreciate how low rise it is. I appreciate sort of the horizon that it's kind of promoting. For the materials, I really kind of, the more I was looking at your elevation, the more I started to notice this kind of partie diagram where sort of like half of, you know, there's kind of like a sandwich where there's kind of the tough metal materials that are kind of overlaying on these natural materials. And I'm hearing some of my other board members' feedback, and I can kind of see maybe pushing that a little bit more where maybe, you know, I like where the wood and the green walls are currently. Maybe there's an opportunity to introduce them on the is it the Embarcadero side? Yes, the shorter side. And I think also what's really lovely about reclaimed wood is being really close to it. And so perhaps there's an opportunity to kind of snake it through the interior have it connect on the other side. There's kind of a cool experience for the customers to see that kind of relationship that you're creating between these kind of more brand appropriate materials and then this natural material that makes everyone feel a lot better. You know, as it relates to the Mercedes columns that are pretty typical, I don't have any love for them necessarily. I think the design as you have it now makes a lot of sense in this context. And in some ways, I think those other columns didn't really make much sense in this context. And I think I'd also even encourage pushing that natural palette even more. I think a previous iteration, those facades on that face the baylands that, you know, board member Lee and Lou mentioned are a little blank. I think a previous iteration had just green screens in some locations where there was a little opportunity for greenery on those sides with a lot less maintenance. And I think also because those sides face the baylands, there's some kind of good relationship to create there. And I might even encourage a green roof. You know, this is kind of a cool location and you're doing something really amazing with this green wall, and how cool would it be to have that even creep over onto the roof? So this is just some feedback for pushing your design concept. But I think it's in a really good place right now, and hopefully this feedback is helping to bring it even further. I'm just going to mention that for the DEE, I'm okay with that DEE to not build to the line. I'm also a big fan of those trees. I really would hate to see those trees go away. I'm sort of in the camp where try to keep those trees at all costs. Try to make it work, you know, on the street side if possible. I think I would support a proposal that keeps those trees at any cost. Let's see. I think I mentioned, I think everything has been said for the most part. Alrighty, is there any more discussion from other board members from things that they've heard others say?
So I was just taking some notes as well. There was some concerns about, you know, the loading spaces where offsite cars may be coming from. We talked about the bike path in the trees. Board member Lou was also talking about grade changes and how that may affect, you know, trees that are to remain. The car wash, you know, we're aware and we'll get a noise report for that. We definitely, for a formal application, will need lots more detail as far as materials and elevations and landscape plans. So staff will make sure to get that. And then there was a question about where customers were going to wait and the pathway, you know, sort of path of travels internal to the site. So I think those are the major concerns or I guess discussion items that I was picking up on. And I just, maybe if we can ask the applicant if they had any questions before we move forward.
Sure.
This is Eric Iverson again. No specific questions. If the one on the big general, if you'd like me to answer a question on the vehicle storage, I could do that. If that's inappropriate, we could wait for the future, but I'll keep that one really short. You know, in the automotive industry, we go up and down with our inventory. So almost all of our facilities have short-term storage on a month-to-month basis as inventory changes over the year. So the key is to not over-design the site so that there's empty parking on site, but to find parking in an industrial area. So we will have off-site vehicle storage of one kind or another. And as far as the other items, I think there were a lot of great suggestions, and I think we will take a look about how we can variate the facade and how to play around with the green walls and such stuff. It's all great ideas. We'll see what we can come up with.
Great, thank you. If there's nothing else. I
have a question, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead.
To Jody, what is the approval process now? ARB to completion, we recommend approval and planning department says it's okay, or does it have to go to city council again? I think.
Sorry, remind me, Sheldon, this is site and design though. So actually it would go through PTC, ARB, and then council.
This has to go back to the council again?
Yes, that's our standard site and design process because it's in the Baylands area. It has that D overlay is why it needs to do that.
Okay, I guess the gist of my question is that I think the staff and the town as a whole is tired of keeping going over the same thing over and over again, and anything we can do to expedite this process to the applicant. If you can find a way to really resolve that bike path issue, it's going to really smooth your passage through all this regulatory stuff. To the planning staff, there's just a way we can get the next application in front of us, one we can recommend approval on. Let's get the pieces together and make it go a lot smoother this time. I think everybody would really appreciate that. Certainly I would. This has been quite a few times now to look at the same property. So
we agree, and we agree, and we'll just make sure that we have, you know, all of those details that you expect with the materials. And
thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll close this item. And I believe Board Member Lee will be leaving.
Yes, thank you, Chair Osma. I will recuse myself given employment with Stanford.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. So we'll move on. So our next item, let me change pages. All right. Our next item is a public hearing quasi-judicial project 180 El Camino Real. Recommendation of replacement of wall signs for Macy's that do not comply with the Stanford Shopping Center Master Tenant Facade and Sign Program. Additionally, considering revisions to the Master Tenant Facade and Sign Program for anchor tenants. Environmental assessment exempt per guideline section 15301. Staff? Oh, are there any disclosures? Sorry.
Yes, I visited the site.
I also visited the site, and I did want to point out a couple items that I've raised to staff. Is that I saw some additional signs that aren't in our package, like new signs. I think there were like 6 or 7. And then also I wanted to point out to other members of the board, if you didn't go to the site, that some of those existing wall signs are sort of like on axis. And that's why they cross some of those construction joints in the brick.
Some of them, Alex.
David Hirsch, I visited the site and the board, City Hall. And yes, Alex, you're right. There are additional signs that were there, I noticed. Some of them actually have the new graphics, but they aren't a part of this presentation.
I appreciate the disclosures. I could not visit the site. I was out of town, but I did visit the material board very, very late last night. Alrighty, go ahead, staff.
Good morning, board. Samuel Gutierrez, planner for this project here, shopping center planners. I think this is our first ARB, or at least my first ARB of the year, so Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Yeah, good to see everybody virtually. So we do have a presentation, and I do appreciate the comment by board member Lou I will be addressing those signs that he mentioned in his disclosure in the presentation. So let me share my screen. If we could just get a confirmation that this screen is sharing by everybody. Can everybody see the screen?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the Stanford Shopping Center, the Macy's building. Of course, there used to be 2 Macy's buildings. Now there's only one. This is I guess you'd say, all-encompassing Macy's at the Stanford Shopping Center located at 180 El Camino Real. Next slide. So to provide some background and context, the Stanford Shopping Center has a master tenant facade sign program, and the program was developed to regulate facades, signage, materials, and design throughout the shopping center. And it also provides the level of review that would be required based on tenant location and size. This was done to provide some consistency in the shopping center while allow some variation. However, we did notice, and that is the second point of the recommended action, is that the anchor tenants were not specifically called out in the master tenant facade sign program, other than that they would require some type of A or B review or possibly staff review. Macy's, the subject building, is also known as Building K, is a long-standing anchor tenant. It is the largest single tenant building at the shopping center. And the larger existing wall signs predate the master tenant facade program. Signage does, as a result, does not comply with the master tenant facade program, and any changes require a signage exemption. That's why we're here before you. So here's the site. Again, we could see the Macy's located here. I hope you all could see the cursor as I'm hovering. And then these are the proposed large signs for the Macy's with their relative location pointed out. It should be noted that the signs are illuminated. So the star logo, the kind of corporate Macy's star logo, is internally illuminated, while the Macy's copy is halo illuminated. So here we see that there's the other signs located at the corners and I would say the interior mall entry at CL2 over the doorway there with the awning. And then you see to the left on this slide the corners of the Macy's building. If you're entering from kind of the parking lot in Sand Hill or coming from further down the way, like towards El Camino, and you go down that walkway, you'll encounter these signs at the corner of the building. Again, the applicant's proposing to change out these signs. And just a note, the brick panels that are around the facade of the building are 24 feet wide with pretty large band spacing. There's about 5-inch separation between each of the facade panels. So then that's just something to note as the ARB considers the proportions of the signs and the layout on the building. So the existing signage versus the proposed, again, the existing signage does not comply with the master tenant facade program. It does comply with the sign code, however. If we were just to apply the Palo Alto Municipal Sign Code from Title 16, the signage that's on the building, the wall signs, does not exceed the limitations per that code. The applicant is proposing smaller signs than what's existing. And then the conflict there is that if we apply the master tenant facade program limit for the signs, they would be limited to only 24 inches tall, so only 2 feet tall, where I believe the existing signs are approximately 5 feet tall. So that is a very dramatic change. And again, this is one of the largest buildings in the entire shopping center. So it is interesting there. This is considered a four-sided building, and it doesn't touch any other shopping center mass or, you know, continuous buildings with smaller tenants. It is a standalone though. It does have one of the arcades over it that do kind of span between the buildings. So here's this additional signage that was brought up. The signage is displayed inside of the kind of entries where there's concrete kind of frames that project out. On the larger kind of you know, archway entries, so the one from the parking lot or the entry facing towards the Neiman Marcus building in the Apple Store, for example, in the first slide, they are really right next to the doors, as you could see here in this lower left photo. And then again, this is on the lower right. This is that corner signage near the storefronts to kind of give people wayfinding abilities there. And these signs are actually quite small. We liken them to secondary signage. I will go a bit more in detail in the next slide in terms of the Master Tenant Facade program, but also kind of like wayfinding signs, because if you do approach the building from the interior of the mall, you will not see the large wall signs. You will see these kind of corner or doorway signs. The signs themselves in the doorway in particular measure approximately 6 square feet, so they're not very large. They are just pin-mounted flat acrylic letters. So going here from the proposed signage to the Master Tenant Facade program, again, the limit there is the height conflict, where you're limited to 24 inches tall. And then also you're only limited to one primary wall sign. Again, this was considering the vast majority of tenants that really only have one wall, or perhaps have a secondary wall with no entry if they're a corner tenant at some of the other buildings in the shopping center, not you know, freestanding you know, anchor tenant like the Macy's Building K is. So here we could see again another example of the application of the Master Tenant Facade program. We have a storefront, and then we have a secondary wall where you don't see an entry for secondary signage, again, to kind of find your way to that store. And then here we could see that the height criteria is spelled out across the tenant space facade. There is, of course, the 36-inch limit, but that would be for stack signs, likened to like the North Face copy, something like that, where there's two lines of tenant name copy, where, of course, the Macy's is a single line. So moving on, we have the sign exception, again, requires findings to be made in support of the approval. And this one here in particular requests to exceed the maximum number of signage, total number of signs, and the height per the approved Master Tenant Facade sign program, again, the 24-inch height limit. So here we have identified them in bullet points. We'll move on. The sign exception, again, these are the required findings, that there's some exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions applicable to the property that's generally not, you know, applicable to the other properties there. And considering the shopping center as kind of its own kind of, you know, neighborhood, if you will, because of course the shopping center is either surrounded by Stanford land, for a mini forest of redwoods, or medical buildings, and then there is Ronald McDonald House on Sand Hill, and some retirement communities further down before you get to the medical center. So in looking at that, if we were to apply the Master Tenant Facade program as is to the Macy's building, it would be a little strange considering how large the Macy's building is in comparison to the standard tenant spaces, which are approximately, you know, 20 feet tall, where this one is over 50 feet tall, you know, with a large facade. You know, we're talking about a building that's over 200,000 square feet of retail space versus the standard tenant space in the shopping center varies from, you know, 1,000 to, you know, 10,000 square feet. And then there are some larger, you know, other buildings like the Flemings or the Wilkes-Bashford that do have some more square feet. So it would just seem a little strange to apply the master tenant facade program there, and we made the finding that it would be a little burdensome there and wouldn't be exceptional, or excuse me, would be exceptional for this to have this granted. The second finding noted here, this would preserve the ability of the Macy's building to stand out, you know, again, with its presence in the shopping center, to have larger signage, be identified that way. It isn't the, you know, the top anchor tenant at the shopping center in terms of size. And then, of course, granting an approval would not be detrimental to any health or general welfare or convenience. These are just signs. They're not, you know, changing any land or, you know, creating any safety violations. As we move on, we did suggest, you know, through this application, we found that, again, there was a flaw in the master tenant facade program. We got the consistency. I could say after years of applying this program, it's created a pretty good consistency in the shopping center and efficiency. However, again, when it comes to these anchor tenants, we found this issue as identified with the Macy's. And here you could see, this is kind of the guidelines in the top right from the master tenant facade program, where we created a map of the different buildings in the general shopping center mass. And the parameters for review are identified there. And here you could see in this table that the Macy's Building K is the largest anchor tenant at the shopping center, just by square feet and sheer size when you look at it in the map of the entire shopping center. Again, it didn't, when we developed the program, we didn't fully consider the context of the anchors in terms of their signage and even some other details. So that's where we would seek, you know, some more conversation there. You know, again, the intent of the program was to be adjusted over time, so we could modify and change things, understanding that the retail environment may change over time at the shopping center. So that is where we have potentially an opening now to make some modifications. Staff does seek the guidance of the ARB on kind of refinement, you know, suggestion of where we would go forward from this. And again, this is the parameters here for the shopping center signage in particular. And we could see that this table here seems to better fit with the smaller tenants, but when looking at the limits of the signage and the size, it doesn't really seem fitting for 50-foot tall buildings, you know, over 100,000 square feet in floor area. So this, in the staff report, it was noted that the, you know, we suggested perhaps a starting point conversation might be that the maximum signage could be considered perhaps 80% of the wall area sign code, or excuse me, the wall area allowed by the Palo Alto Municipal Sign Code. That's noted here in Table 3. You know, in concept, if we apply that type of limitation, for example, to the Macy's signage now, that would limit the project to a maximum sign area per wall of 162 square feet rather than 203 maximum, because the building's so big, it actually reaches the very top maximum for wall signage. So again, just a little conversation starter there. Moving forward to the recommendation, we recommend for the ARB to recommend approval to the proposed project, the sign exception, to the Director of Planning and Development Services based on the findings and subject to the conditions of approval, and also to provide direction to staff regarding the future application of the Master Tenant Facade Program for anchor tenants. And that wraps up staff's presentation.
Thank you, Sam. Do we have a presentation by the applicant?
Yes.
All right.
Let's see. Bill, if you are unmuted, I believe you are.
Yeah, I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Just tell me what to do.
If you have your presentation up and you could share your screen for us, that'd be great.
Okay. All right.
We'll ask you to state and spell your name for the record, since they don't see the text on these meetings.
My name is Bill Comer. All California Signs is my company. So I think Samuel presented the case.
Sorry, could you spell your name?
Oh,
The transcriber.
Billcomer.
Thanks. You have 10 minutes.
Okay. So I think Samuel presented the case quite well. When they developed the master program, sign program for the shopping center, they didn't really take into account what the needs of the anchor tenants would be. So what I put here is to show that, the pictures in a sign business, that's what we're doing is pictures. So we've got, this one up here in the corner.
Sorry, Bill.
Oh,
you're not sharing.
Say again?
You have to share your screen.
Share my screen. Okay. Share my screen. There we go. Okay. And share. How's that? Oh, there.
We can see it.
Yes.
All right, great.
Thanks.
So what I did is I put, this is what's existing. And this one is what the sign program would allow. And the bottom left is what we're asking for. So on this particular elevation view, we show that what we gave to Sam crosses this architectural line here, but now we've brought it back in to fit inside the two lines. Bloomingdale's was a couple, I think, almost 8 years back now. And the same thing, we got, this would have been, this bottom one here would have been what was allowed by the sign program. And this, the top view is what you allowed, gave us a variance for. And I think you can see that it's pretty tiny, hard to read on the bottom one. And Neiman Marcus, I assume that sign's been up there quite a while and it's quite large. But this is the difference in size and how it would look on the building if we went with the sign program. So that's pretty much my whole presentation. I think I need a little larger sign. None of these signs are visible from the street. They all are visible only from the interior of the mall. These are the three signs that we're asking for the variance on. So this is the side of the building that faces the new parking lot. I guess it would be what would it be? The south side of the shopping center, I believe. This one faces if you could stand there and look all the way to the other end of the mall, you'd see the again, and then this one's the one we started out looking at. So other than that, I guess I can answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Does anybody on the board have any questions for staff or the applicant?
I do.
Go ahead, Board Member Hirsch.
Yes, in our package here, the pages aren't numbered. Oh, yeah, page 4 in our packet. The Macy's sign that faces, well, let's say the plaza area where the Apple store is. It shows the Macy's overlapping the line on the left side.
Yeah, let me go to that slide. You're talking about this one, correct?
No, no,
No.
no. Facing,
This one. You're talking about this one?
yeah.
Yeah. I noticed this when I got ready to do this presentation today, that we had an old photo in there showing, but this is how, on here is how we want the sign to look.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure. We've gone through several variations, sent it to the mall for approval and Stanford for approval and getting it to Sam and back. And it looks like I made a mistake in there.
Okay, so just one more here, just to make sure. On page 6 of 8, where there's a lower display, just, display windows. The one Cl5, could you go to that one just to make sure that it's doing what I see on the drawings? Yeah.
I have,
Okay, that one and that one. Is that where it's going to be? The one to the right there?
I don't like the looks of it. It was put there because that's just matches where the old one was, but we didn't discuss it is the answer. And I'm sure they wouldn't be adverse to moving it to one side or the other, probably to the left side of the, I'd have to look at the post and stuff to see how much visual impact, are we impacted from people seeing it coming down those long corridors leading into the mall. So yeah, be happy to move it one way or the other.
It's a kind of a moving target, right? When you're walking this way, the columns of the holding up the roof structure there.
Yeah, it's pretty cluttered. It's pretty cluttered in there.
Yes. Okay, well, thank you.
Any more questions?
Yes, so I have a question for staff, for Sam. Sam, the master tenant facade sign program, is that established as a bureaucratic policy, or is that something legislatively approved by city council?
We approved it by staff via the ARB. We didn't go to city council by that.
So it's different from the town sign ordinance, which is part of the municipal code. Is that correct?
Correct. It's in effect an expanded master sign program. That's the more typical thing that gets presented to the board. Where in this case, we did a master sign and facade program with the intention to, again, kind of create some continuity in terms of materials and design, because you might recall in past years, the shopping center facades would not go all the way up to the top parapet. So there would be the old mall, you would see the old band of, it's kind of a corrugated concrete band at the top. So this program actually then kind of codified the concept moving forward of any new tenant that comes in and still has that old band has to complete their facade all the way up. We say, you have to go all the way up, as noted in the facade program. And then the signage, again, kind of creates consistency. We don't necessarily say that there's a square foot limit, but there is a height limit, and then locations are called out to create that internal consistency at the shopping center.
Okay, then within this sign program, is there a definition of an anchor tenant? Is that someplace established?
No, there is not a definition of an anchor tenant in the sign program.
And do you have one that you would propose then, or how do you propose to make that work?
I believe that it would be a square footage threshold along with, building type. In terms of an anchor tenant, we broached the subject before at the ARB approximately 2 years ago now, I believe, when we went with a sign exception for Pacific Catch, which is a larger tenant within a bigger shopping center or building, and then having multiple sides. And in that discussion, we found that we couldn't support the exemption because it wasn't actually an anchor tenant. So taking that conversation and applying it, moving forward, you know, a proposal would be a standalone building with square feet exceeding 30,000 square feet. And then that would actually identify most of the retail kind of department stores, or even the forthcoming under construction restoration hardware building would be considered an anchor tenant. So that would be kind of language that we would use moving forward. And it would be a good suggestion to incorporate that into a modification of the program.
So I had seen in your report someplace a statement along the lines of any building that's single occupancy would essentially be anchor tenant building. And
Right.
I'm concerned about that because there's some that are very small that are obviously not anchor tenants. A Shake Shack, for example.
Right. Well, Shake Shack is building W, and they are connected with the PF Chang's. Perhaps the Flemings would be an example of a single tenant building, but it's not anywhere near the size of the Macy's or Neiman Marcus or Bloomingdale's. So yes.
The last part of my question, I'm just trying to understand the legislative nature of the master tenant sign program. Aren't these generally coming from an applicant, from, in this case, the owner of the shopping center, rather than from planning staff? It seems like you guys are writing these programs. And is that the way it's usually done?
So originally it was a collaborative effort. The shopping center via Simon sought to kind of more standardize the process in the shopping center, instead of it being a case-by-case kind of scenario, which would, you know, develop a lot of variation and inconsistencies. And also staff seeing the shopping center and all of the turnover for some of these smaller tenants, we saw the need to develop a program to create consistency and an understanding to kind of deal with the normal tenants that come in and out or refresh their storefronts. So that was kind of it became a collaborative effort between staff and the property owner.
Is it still collaborative, or is it something that you are doing now?
We work with Simon regularly on it. You know, this in particular was brought to Simon's attention. They did not object to, you know, us seeking potential modifications for the anchor tenants. You know, the anchor tenants themselves, at least, you know, the department stores, the larger buildings, they don't readily change over. I mean, these are the long-standing tenants of the shopping center. They are the big tenants. So again, this does not come up very often at all. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thanks for the answering the question, Sam. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff or the applicant? Great. Do we have any members of the public that would like to speak, Ben?
Chair Thompson, I'm sorry. Chair Thompson, we do not have any public comments for this item.
Thank you. I guess we'll bring this back to the board now. Board Member Hirsch, would you like to go first?
One moment. Bill, could you stop sharing your screen?
Say it again.
Could you stop sharing your screen?
Oh, stop sharing your screen. I'm sorry. Okay, sure.
Thank you. Alrighty, go ahead, Board Member Hirsch.
Okay, thank you. Where to start? I think I would do it from the numbers that on the pamphlet that we received. So we'd start with CL1, which is, as you pointed out, or everybody pointed out, is across from the parking lot. And so this new location for, well, this new graphics are replacing these older graphics, which are really on this side rather humongous. And by the way, let's just start by saying it's an incredible improvement in the graphics period. The star is terrific. I think the use of the star again is rather than some other element is a nice idea for the hyphen The scale of the Macy's letters are very nice. The proportions of them look very nice to me. And it's a major improvement. So thank you for that. I'm sure you worked with the Macy's people on this, and however that came about, I don't know, but it's a big improvement. On this particular one, you know, you come out of that parking lot, and I was trying to think, where are these people going to see this sign? And they actually come from various locations, even if the crosswalks are at a corner here. They would still see the building from different locations because the access to the parking lot is differentiated, different area. I almost feel like a second sign at the other corner of the building, just similar to this one, might be a good idea, but this is certainly a nicer proportioned sign. And then you have the entry right there, immediately entry. So most people, I think, are going to know if they're parking in that area, are going to be going to Macy's, perhaps on the way to somewhere else, but this is a big improvement. CO2 over the side door, the facing Bloomingdale's, as you pointed out, is again much better proportioned, lower down. I sort of felt that, you know, as you show these graphics, what would be kind of nice for us would be to see the entire wall, to see where the graphics are on the wall relative to the mass of the building, all the way to the roof, to the floor, to the ground. Just as a presentation, it certainly looks fine here. My thought was that it could be a little bit lower and still work nicely in proportion to the wall, but it's not a critical comment, really. The number, let's see, CL3, I really have a problem, as you do, Mr. Comer, with it crossing over the line. And, you know, you are, after all, fixing up the wall where previous signs are going to be removed and putting in the new sign. So I don't know why you couldn't move that sign away from the dividing line, the brick break line in the outside of the building, and put it over the window itself, the design window. I mean, it just doesn't work for me there at all. And as we discussed, you come down the lane from the parking lot, and you'll see it from one location or another. It's a fine identity at some point along there that you won't miss, basically. So I suggest that one, I can't accept, I personally can't accept that very well. So moving on to C4, that's fine. That's a nice location. You do see it coming in. It works well with the display window. You know, it's perfect right there. And then the final one, thank heavens you did what you did. You moved that to the panel, the next panel over, and you managed to incorporate the entire larger sign, larger but not as large as the original. So I think in proportion to the wall, although we can't see that drawing, maybe the next submission we'll get to see it if we don't approve these right now. The only thing I'm kind of wondering about is that there's almost an opportunity to do something else on this wall and keep the wall clean, because in going into the store itself, you know, that's the way in which the outside structure kind of works with the planting behind it growing up, and the archways, and then the major archway with a lot of openings in it. to the store. And actually, there's this kind of vertical grid, I guess, holding up the canopy in some way that's above the door. And the first part of it, up to the upper windows, up to the upper archway there, is really doing nothing. The inside of the store is blanks out. If there's supposed to be windows that you're looking at, you don't see them when you're inside the store. So you almost feel like right above that major door that faces out to a major plaza wouldn't have your graphics on it, be closed off as a paneled area and coordinated with maybe a better paint job, et cetera, all around the entry there. I mean, this is a major change, I'll agree, but if I were voting on this, I would say put the sign right there it's a major point of entry to the building, major access inside. So why isn't it the signage within that? That if I were Macy's, I would want it there. But then again, of course, when you're stepping far back in that little plaza area there, you do want to see it. And I think therefore the lighting of it would have to be different for nighttime viewing. But just sticking it up on the wall there doesn't for me do the trick. It's not important enough. But the archway would coordinate all of the graphics into the design of this building. So other than that, I would say I approve the graphics themselves, and with those couple of changes, I think that the scaling down of the Macy's on this major store is and generally speaking throughout the shopping center, as you pointed out, is a big improvement in the graphics, and however that is achieved, with Sam and the city and the sign program, it could be like a new program for the standalone large buildings of a certain size. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Hirsch. Board Member Liu?
Okay, so thank you. I think that the signs are generally looking good. I would say I have some similar comments to David. So one is the sign Cl5. I think that the alignment is off, the location is off. It seems to me it could be sort of aligned with the window, or it could be aligned between the columns and the pyramidal skylights, but it's not working as it is. So I think that one needs to shift somehow. Sign Cl4, as I looked at it on the site, it's too low. That if you're coming in from like the Clarion Court alignment, there are some new planters with trees, and I think the sign is hidden by the tops of the trees. So I can accept it as it is, but it seems like it's not quite working as well as it could be. I'm okay with actually the Cl5 sign location. I think that's fine. And then on the master sign program, so Sam, I pulled up my old notes from 2015. I didn't take a lot of notes here on it, on the document, but I think maybe if you want more clarity on what the board wanted before, I think it was condition of approval number 23. I think that the board wanted to see any signs if they were larger dimensions. And I think, and the board clearly understood that the anchor tenants were not going to comply with this particular document. So, like, I don't need to see 24-inch sign letters. Like, we know that that's not going to work, and the board knew that at the time. My recollection is that the folks at Simon said that there were very complicated lease agreements with each anchor tenant and how much visibility they had to have, and that they couldn't just put it in one simplified master sign program. So I think in that sense, I'm okay with keeping it as is, where it just has to come back to the board or to staff. And I think we should note too, though, that if you try to create an anchor tenant definition, I think what will happen is you're gonna have things like restoration hardware and anthropology say that they're anchor tenants. Because we already had that when the anthropology store came in. They wanted to build their building to look like an anchor tenant. And then the board said, you know, we really want you to fit in with the smaller buildings. So if the staff want to simplify it, I'm actually okay with it, but I think we have to set the threshold pretty high, like higher than, I would say higher than the anthropology store. So, so that's where I am. I don't know where the other board members are feeling, but like I think that this should come back. It seems like there are enough inconsistencies in the drawings that we could do it one more time. If time is of the essence, then I'm okay with this maybe coming back to subcommittee. Thanks.
Thanks, Board Member Liu. Board Member Balte?
Thank you, Ozma. Thanks, everybody. I'm okay with the signs as presented, as long as sign CL3 gets shifted left or right, as board members Hirsch and Liu have commented. I'll also comment that I think sign CL3 and sign CL4 should probably be at the same elevation. Alex may well be correct that CL4 is too low, but I believe those two are seen along the same facade with the same relationship to the decorative window front underneath. I'm perfectly fine letting the applicant make decisions on how those are placed in detail, as long as CL3 is shifted so it's not going across the brick pattern, and we can leave it to staff to make that final evaluation. This is an internal shopping center thing. I'm okay with the sign exception allowing the larger signs. If anything, CL1 should be bigger, although then it wouldn't fit with the brick patterning on the wall. So I'm perfectly fine with the way it is there. To me, the bigger issue is whether we try to sort of put all this into the sign program. And I agree completely with what Alex just said. I think that coming up with a definition of an anchor tenant is going to be problematic. And because they're so rare that we have this issue anyway, I think it's much better just to bring it to the review board when you have a case of the sign being larger than what the program calls for. I think, Sam, you have an excellent idea of what's likely to be approved and such, and you can advise tenants of that. We've clearly established this 4 feet 4 inches seems to be about the right size for these larger buildings. But I think you'll find that if you try to actually write it down and put it into code, it gets complicated, and you really just open yourself up to odd questions and arguments, which you don't have. And I have to say, I'm a little bit uncomfortable that you're spending city money and time coming up with what really should be an applicant's responsibility. This is Simon Properties shopping mall, and they should be coming to you with a request for a sign program that we can approve. And so it just struck me. My notes here I thought this was something that the city council had voted on, and then we really need to go through them. On the flip side of all that, I have to say that Jody, you and your staff have done an excellent job managing this shopping center. Sam has been really focused and wonderful. It's fantastic to have one person, one very capable planner looking this over. Sam is absolutely right that the consistency of signage, consistency of design as a whole, consistency of the approval process has really improved. And it's something you want to keep going and keep working on. So I give you latitude that way. And maybe if you really feel you need to improve the sign program, fine, put time into it, but work with the applicant. And you got to come up with a better definition of anchor tenant, Sam. I'll caution you, I don't think you can do it, but you've done a great job so far, so I don't want to handicap you on what you're doing, but I think right now what we have is working. The few times where we have a big sign, we're happy to look at it. And as you can tell from our comments, we're focused and caring enough about it that you don't need to legislate every piece of it. And I think what's before us today is otherwise quite approvable. To that effect, I had made a few changes to some of the findings, but why don't we finish with Ozma's comments, and then if she wants us to, we can get into that. Thank you.
Sure, thank you. Alrighty, well, I'll kind of repeat and add to. So CL1 appears to be good across the board. CL2 is also okay. Agree with my fellow board members that CL3 should be adjusted. I did have a note that I think it should be aligned, right, justified with the window edge, so that it is still kind of close to its original location, but justified on the right side to maximize visibility. CL4, I agree that it should be maintained at the same height. If it is too low because of the trees, that might be an issue, and it might not be the right location. So I'll trust Board Member Liu's note on that, because I did not see that. And then for CL5, I do appreciate Board Member Hirsch's suggestion for CL5 being within the arch. Was kind of struggling with that a little bit as well, because we all kind of noticed that it was straddling the line, and I understand the applicant chose to put it on the right side, but that arch has some depth, and if you're standing right where the arch is, then potentially the arch would obscure that sign if it is on the right side. So I had a thought maybe it might be better to put it on the left side, and then Board Member Hirsch came up with an idea of putting it in the middle of the arch. And I do think in the middle of the arch, you know, that would be the most straightforward place to put it. That's where you're entering. But I think CL5 potentially needs a little bit more discussion. I did hear Board Member Balte and Liu say they are okay with that location, but maybe we should do a straw poll on that in a minute. And then for the sign program, oh, sorry, really quick before that, you know, we're getting rid of these big signs, and I have a huge concern that they're going to leave shadow marks behind them against the facade. And so I don't know if there's something in the conditions to make sure that, you know, when we get rid of that, that there's some sort of way to clean it or something. I'm not sure how you clean something that's cleaner than everything else around it, but some way to blend it in. And then for the sign exception program, you know, for the anchor tenant issue, I'm really sort of less fussed with that. It's really more about how this sign relates to the wall. Like, I actually think it's more about the architecture that it's being put against, rather than how much money this potential tenant is bringing in, which is kind of how I understand an anchor tenant. But you know, really, I think the reason these changes make sense is because this is a bigger building. And, you know, the shopping center has a lot of smaller scale stuff, which calls for smaller scale signs. And this is a bigger scale building, and therefore it calls for bigger scale signs. And so I think proportion is really more what I think needs to be considered over whether it's an anchor tenant or not. Okay, so that's all my notes. I wrote we should potentially do a straw poll for CL4, the height of CL4, and then a straw poll for CL5 in terms of how we feel about the location of that. So let's start with CL4. Do we feel like it is too low where it is? I'll start with Board Member Hirsch.
Well, you know, I thought that actually Alex, and he could clarify this. I thought he was really talking about CL2 when he talked about the height of the signs, because the signs that are above those windows should match up, because they're on the same, actually on the same facade, the two of them, CL4
and CL3.
Yeah. So the height of those should be similar above the display window. But Alex was mentioning the one, the opening, I think, so he can clarify for us.
Okay.
CL2, the height of that, which I thought could be a little bit lower. And then he mentioned the trees along the further along that alleyway. I believe that was what the discussion was. So that particular Macy's he thought should be higher. And I also mentioned the fact that it isn't being shown with a full wall elevation. So it's a little hard to tell proportionately. So the whole idea of presenting signs ought to be something that is done almost with different perspective angles. You step back, see it in the alleyway that's in front or the open plaza in front. And then you get closer to it relative to the canopy and where the canopy's perspective then might interrupt the proportion above. That would make it easier to see. But first of all, are we talking about CL2 or are we talking about CL4? Alex?
So actually, why don't you clarify, Board Member Liu?
I believe
Yeah, so
you were doing a straw poll on CL4, correct?
I was
Right.
doing the straw poll on the height of CL4.
Yeah. I think it's hard. I would think that it's hard for us to do a poll if there isn't any information to see, like, the issue. Like, I could send you guys a photo at the moment that I took yesterday, but maybe it's better just to either have it come back or we just approve it with minor, whatever minor adjustments.
How about if we just say that CL3 and CL4 have to align, Alex, and then they can decide what height exactly with the planning staff?
But we'd have to ask them to consider the height if that's what we want to do for both of them.
So the applicant just needs some general direction. And if we want to bring this back to subcommittee, if we want to bring it back to staff, just who to bring it back to would be the question.
I'm okay with it going to staff as long as they're the same height. I think the applicant and staff can figure it out. That's my straw poll vote.
Okay. I'll agree with that.
I would agree with that.
Okay. I think it should come to subcommittee, but this is a democracy.
We got so many things we're trying to do with the planning staff right now. This is just not high on the list.
Well, there's other things too. So so let's talk about CL5. Board Member Hirsch had a suggestion for a different location. I would be open to that. And then also even whether it's on the left side or the right side of that joint. Can I hear some opinions on CL5?
I'm okay with it where it's proposed on the facade. I think it is crossing the joint, but it seems to me still that it works. I think it'd be fine in the middle of the arch, but I don't want to be designing this for the applicant. If they wanted it there, they should propose it there. It's a big change from how the sign will function, and I'm uncomfortable just mandating that.
So to clarify, the applicant showed today that it is no longer straddling that joint. The applicant showed it on the right side of the joint today. Which I understand is the case.
Fine with that too.
Okay. Board Member Liu?
So, I actually have fond memories of looking out that window, as well as the other window, the other big arch window. You used to be able to see out. I know my recollection is it was floor to ceiling glass, and so I think I'm not so. Yeah, I think I'm okay with the wall sign. It seems to me if you do try to put a halo lit sign there, then it's going to look completely different than the other signs, right? Because the lighting is internal and it's bouncing off of the brick. And so it seems to me that that's a different, like that would be a different animal altogether. And if you're trying to do that, then I would think that you're actually trying to do like an awning sign, perhaps, or something like something like a canopy sign. So yeah, I think I'm not supporting moving that one.
Do you have an opinion whether it's on the left side of the construction joint or the right side?
Yeah, I think what the applicant showed today in the presentation is better than the drawing set.
Sorry, that wasn't my question. It was a question of whether the sign should be entirely on the right side or entirely on the left side of the joint. The applicant showed today it on the right side, and I had mentioned that might
Right.
get obscured by the architecture.
Yeah, but I haven't seen the other option, right? So.
Okay, I'll note you down as okay with
I
it.
So am I?
Signs would be better. All the signs sounded better. Stepping back farther, like at the photo simulations, would be actually better, showing more of the context. Yeah.
Okay. All right, Board Member Hirsch on CL5.
So, yeah, your point you raise is a good one, I think, whether it's to the right or to the left of that particular joint. In previous other examples here, it's kept on the right-hand side. Oh, no, I'm sorry, excuse me. It's kept on the end of the building. So it's too bad we couldn't see it in that location in the proportion. I don't know if by putting it there, because both of those panels seem to be approximately the same size, whether it would feel cramped in that at the end wall. But I think Ozma, you raised the issue, and it's too bad we should really ask to see it. And that pushes us a little bit more into the committee versus not seeing it again. And you know, Alex mentioned a couple of reasons why I just think the Macy's ought to be part of the discussion of the door and signage and in change in scope, because obviously this is a major, I'm not denying that it isn't a major scope change to put it in the arch, but it's not a bad idea in terms of what would be possible, even if it led to them building a kind of a background for the sign to be against that simply took up the space of all of the non-usable windows. Inside, those ceilings have been dropped and you can't see out that, and Alex's memory of having light behind him coming through isn't there anymore. You know, it just isn't inside. So the outside, which is not exactly a pretty structural element, could very well be done differently, where it would have create a background for a sign within the arch. But all of that said, I admit it is a much more major change in how this is done. It involves more than just putting a sign on the side of a building. But if this is a suggestion that others would agree is worth studying while we, let's say, discuss this other major sign on the side of this building, then why not suggest it? And that's why I did, because I think it's a much better location if it were in the arch. So if this word could get back to Macy's and to Simon's and it were considered, I think it would be a benefit to the whole shopping center to make that kind of improvement.
Okay.
I'll defer. If you as a chair would like this to go to subcommittee, I can easily support that.
Okay. I'm going to really quickly share my screen to show at least what Google Earth shows on the street view. So this is the sign in question, and we're sort of discussing,
Where'd you get
can you guys see?
That's very
So, okay, so I feel like maybe it's okay, a good time to make a motion.
Osma, I would like to modify some of the findings perhaps, because I'm concerned about them supporting a change to the whole program. If it's okay?
Sure, go ahead.
On finding 1, this is the ARB findings on page 19 of our packet here. Finding 1, halfway, the 6th line down, there's a break in the sentence that says signage are either 43.75 or 66 square feet in area. I believe all the text after that should just be struck from the rationale. I think all of that is just supporting the change to the program rather than the sign that we're approving. Similarly, down in the second, the project is consistent with finding 2 because, let's see, it would, really we should just strike to where it's the very last 2 words on this page. The proposed signage is of a consistent design and an illumination on each facade, creating a sense of order. I think that's sufficient rationale for approving it again, striking the first 3.5 lines. And then I'd like to strike the last sentence of the rationale for line 3, which is that while the reverse halo illuminate provides a modern look and sleek appearance at night, I'd like to strike that from a rationale for a finding. I don't think that's something we want to necessarily support. So with the indulgence of my colleagues, I'd recommend those changes to the findings.
I'm okay with that. Does Board Member Liu or Hirsch have any comment?
Nope.
If you'd like, Osman, then I can make a motion based on that.
Sure.
But Alex, are you okay with that?
I saw Alex nod. Alex, we can't hear you.
I'll move that we recommend approval of this project with the following items to come back to subcommittee. 1, that sign Cl5 be shifted left or right to avoid the break in the building facade. And 2, that sign Cl5 be properly shown at the location desired. And also that the applicant consider placing the sign instead under the archway. And then the 3rd thing would be that the findings be changed as I previously mentioned. That's my motion.
Do we have a second?
I suggest an amendment that Cl5.
Wait, sorry, I didn't hear a second. Was that Board Member Liu?
I'll second.
Okay. Motion by Balte, seconded by Liu. Did you want to add a friendly amendment?
Friendly amendment, yep. I would suggest that the Cl5 be considered on the left-hand brick panel as an alternate, but go along with the rest of that memo.
So you're saying, David, we should just tell them to put it on the left-hand panel when they put it up on the wall?
If it's on the wall, it should be considered either in possibly on the left-hand panel, which we haven't seen.
That's fine with me, Alex.
Sure. What is the exact language? Consider?
It's
Or are you
consider.
dictating?
It's
on the
consider.
left? I can consider.
Okay, consider. Can I also add a friendly amendment?
You can try, Osman.
That we ask the applicant to consider aligning Cl3 and Cl4 to the same height.
Oh, absolutely. I forgot about that. Yes, thank you. I support that completely.
Okay, I'm great with that.
Okay. There's nothing else. Motion by Balte, seconded by Liu. Can we have a vote? Roll call? How does that?
Yes.
A vote call?
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Lee. Oh,
Absent.
I'm sorry, Board Member Lee is absent.
Recused, yes.
Board Member Liu,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 4-0.
401. And then Chair Thompson, do we want to go ahead and nominate the subcommittee members at this time?
Sure. Board Member Balte looks like he just stepped away, but I'll suggest Board Member Balte and Board Member Hirsch.
Oh, see, when you walk away, you get assignments, right?
All right. Okay to move on? Great. So the next item is approval of minutes. We have the draft architectural review board meeting minutes of December 3rd. I'm going to wait for Board Member Balte to come back to approve these because I was absent for them. And we probably need more than 2 people to vote on the minutes, or do we?
Yeah, we do need a quorum. Actually, he's back, but yeah, there we go.
Okay.
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to approve the draft minutes for meeting minutes for December 3rd. I'll abstain because I was not present. Can someone have a motion?
Sure, I'll move to approve the minutes from December 3rd, 2020.
Second.
Motion by Balte, seconded by Hirsch. Can we get a vote?
Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Liu.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries 3-0-2.
Thank you. Next item is the draft architectural review board meeting minutes from December 17th. I move that we approve these meeting minutes.
Second.
Motion by Thompson, seconded by Balte. Can we get a vote?
Yes. Board Member Balte,
Yes.
Board Member Hirsch,
Yes.
Board Member Liu,
Yes.
Chair Thompson.
Yes.
The motion carries 4-0-1.
Thank you. Okay, our next item are board member questions, comments, or announcements. Alex, do we have any update on the MVCAP item?
Sure. So the NVCAP went to the Planning Commission on January 13th for a second hearing. And I think the Planning Commission gave a lot of good comments about modifying the 3 alternatives to make them more financially feasible. Also, there was a pre-screening for 2951 El Camino. It was actually a second pre-screening at the City Council, and that's within the NVCAP project area.
Yes, and so the project at 2951 El Camino is a pre-screening right now. Eventually, we have heard from the applicant that it will come back as a formal application, and so then it would come to the board at that time. But this would be for a PHZ, really a planned community rezoning. So it would go through all the PTC, ARB, and the City Council ultimately.
Great. And then also too, which was just in the news, if you guys have been following it, is that one of the property owners in the NVCAP area is proposing an office overlay for their properties. So that's going to the City Council on March 1st. So everybody's looking out for their own interests there, it sounds like. And so, stay tuned.
Yeah, so I think with 3045 Park, thank you for these reminders, Alex. 3045 Park is zoned GM, as are, a bunch of those other buildings right there. Some of the other buildings have grandfathered office uses, but because this building is brand new, it doesn't have that grandfathering. They are allowed to do research and development, but they have not been able to find such a tenant. And so they are proposing additional office uses. And as you said, that will be reviewed by council.
And also that park project technically is not in the official NVCAP boundaries. It's on, but
it's just on the other side of the street. Is that correct?
But some of the planning staff have been thinking about adding that in to the boundaries, or, you know, to consider the housing over on those sites as well. So, yeah, and then also the developer, J-Fault, they also own the old HP Agilent Cloudera site.
Yes,
well.
Cloudera, and then also the 2747. So they own 3 properties right there.
Okay, thank you for that update. And then we all got the reminder earlier that the objective standards will be presented at our next meeting. And so just a reminder to the public to send any comments in on that. Any other comments before we adjourn?
I've got a couple more. So in January, William Riggs on the Planning Commission had to resign. So there are 3 vacancies, and the council is scheduled to meet on February 8th to do the PTC as well as the HRB appointments. And then also, there are a whole bunch of other housing projects coming in, right? It sounds like from staff that there are quite a few projects coming in. So we really need to get to work on the adjust standards. I think it's really critical that we really focus on that. I think that's going to be like the biggest thing that the board has ever had to tackle. So, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Alex. So we did over sort of, you know, Christmas and the New Year receive a bunch of new housing projects, which we're excited about. But yes, we also need to make sure we have the proper regulations in place. And so I do appreciate all the work that's gone into those objective standards. And it is our goal to finish those in the summer, you know, but to get them obviously through the ARB before then, because we need to go to council in the summer. So thank you.
Great, thank you. All right, well, thanks everyone. Happy New Year. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Congratulations on your first.
Yes,
Everybody,
first
great
meeting.
job, Osman.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
All right, take care.